The main structural or architectural thing to understand about weights and measures inspections is that they begin with businesses, and then they drill down from businesses to locations, and then within a location they drill down to device types. So you'll see here under the activities menu, we go from businesses to locations to location device types. So what does that mean? Well, I put in a record here a while ago, I think. For example, for Safeway Corporation, you know, big corporate customer out in Houston somewhere, or maybe Dallas, I forget where they are. But they're going to have one or more locations in Imperial County. So we'll create a record for the main headquarters business. And the reason to have that as a common record, as opposed to just listing a headquarters address on each Safeway location, one, it cuts down on data entry. And two, it makes it easier to flag whether you want invoices sent to the location or the headquarters, and whether your device registration certificates get sent to locations or to headquarters. So I've created a parent record for all your Safeways. And if you look on our icons on the end of the row here, we got the pencil, which is always edit. So I can edit that record, change the address, contact information, and so on. I've got the delete, which I can delete a record as usual if it doesn't have anything attached to it or hasn't been used on any inspections or invoices yet. And then I have a new icon here, which is our locations icon. So that's like a little map pin. And that will give me a list of all the Safeways that I have configured in Imperial County. So I've created one location. This number obviously isn't correct, but it's a Safeway out in El Centro. And so let's talk about some of the data we can collect for a location. So when I open up the location details, I'll see the parent business is Safeway. Just by the way, it's very easy when you're creating a location, say for a mom and pop shop. You don't have to go through and create a business record for them. When you're creating a new location, it's very easy to just say, you know, oh, I've got a business selected here. Say no business. It's very easy just to say that the business is the same as the location. So if I don't create a business, it'll just assume that the headquarters is the location. So let's go back to Safeway here. So you can see the parent business is Safeway in Houston. We have a physical address and a mailing address. Contact information, phone, fax, contact name, email. And then a couple of just big text fields, description and county notes. These are whatever use you want to make of them. So if you want to keep track of information about the location, obviously, you know, these are pretty easy for somebody to look up, but they don't really serve any specific purpose other than being a place for you to keep notes. Then we have districts. Now districts, we've gone to kind of a two-level district system. So let me go have a look at our district configuration real quick. If I go into districts, you'll see that we have a district code up here and then a list of districts for that code. So as an example, I'm going to add a new code. You've got rural. I want to create a set of codes that are for price verification. And I'm going to have a PV District 1. Oh, sorry, I put these in the wrong place. PV1, this is Price Verification District 1. I'm going to create a new group code for PV. And this district has nothing to do with ag. It's just for weights and measures. So now you'll see I've got an other group code and a PV group code. And under my price verification group code, I can create multiple entries. So I can do PV2. This is PV District 2. Group code is PV, it's on weights and measures. So now I've got a couple of price verification districts, and then I've got this other, which could be rural and urban. So what it means is you kind of have a choice with districts. You can create one set of districts that you're going to use for everything. Or you can create different sets of districts by either device type or by, you know, season, or what have you. So kind of hard to describe without some more concrete examples, I know, but when you're creating your districts, the genesis of all of this is from Santa Clara County, where they have obviously, so many devices and so many inspectors that they divvy up the county into geographic districts, but the districts are different for price verification than they are, say, for cabs, right? Because they got a certain number of inspectors that do cabs, and so they got to divvy up the county into 4 districts for cabs. For price verification, they've got about 15 inspectors that do that, so they can divvy up the county into different districts for price verification. And that way, as a PV inspector, I've got District 8, whereas as a cab inspector, I've got District 2. And so you can really use these district codes to subdivide things in a bunch of different ways that meet your needs. Now, some of this complexity may be too much for you. There's, obviously lots of ag and probably not quite as much weights and measures activity in Imperial County. But again, the functionality is there if you want to use it. If you don't want to use it, you can just leave everything as a single district code. And that way you'll have a very simple list of districts to work with.
Can you, I'm sorry, I haven't played with the system enough, but can you tell me that little box that you check for and uncheck for whether this has to do with ag, is there on the ag side of the tracking, is there a list of all businesses, like a clearinghouse list of businesses? So if you don't uncheck that, these weights and measures businesses will show up there, is that right?
There's actually, if we look at the location screen, there's a pair of checkboxes down here as to whether they are ag or weights and measures. So there's one place right now where you can use locations for ag activities. That is, when you're doing an ag activity, you'll notice up at the top, we have both a contract and a location. So there are some counties, Alameda notably, where whenever they do their ag dailies, they have to report every ag daily based on a location. And so they'll go in here and they'll pick locations, and it'll filter it down to locations that are flagged as ag locations because we're on an ag daily activity entry form. And then conversely, if I'm in my weights and measures inspections form, let's go to locations here. If I'm searching for locations, it's only going to find locations that are flagged as weights and measures locations. So the main separation of the location in terms of filtering it down depending on what you're doing comes from that location checkbox. But you are correct in that we also have a ag versus weights and measures flag on the districts, right? So you're probably familiar with, separating up ag activities by district. And if you wanted, for example, to start putting in some of your growers or pest control businesses into CalCATS and tracking activities associated with certain growers, you can use a set of districts that match your CalAg permits districts and just flag them as ag districts so that someone who's setting up a weights and measures location doesn't accidentally put them into an ag district.
Got it. Thank you.
Okay, so that's districts. Let's go into our Safeway here. So I can assign multiple districts to a location. This is in an urban area, so I'll put it in the urban district. It's also in my PV District 2. And it might, I might have another set of districts for computing scales or scales in general, and it might be in scales district number 4. Then similar to districts, we have a list of business types. Again, it's part of your county configuration. You can pick your list of how you want to create business types. But a single location can have multiple types in it. For example, I might create business types that are grocery, gas station, farmer's market, drinking water dispensers, coin stars, and a Safeway could be all of those except farmer's market, right? So the location might have, well, we'll have a grocery store, might have a gas station on site, might have a coin star, might have a water dispenser. Now, districts and types are useful when we start looking at the weights and measures planning tools. They help you filter down all of the weights and measures inspections that are due in the county for a given inspector to kind of focus in on the ones that they do, or the ones that they want to focus on in the next 30 days or 2 weeks or whatever their planning horizon is. Okay, then below that, we've got our flags that say whether this is ag or weights and measures. This is being a Safeway, it's just going to be a weights and measures location. We do have yet another classification, which is zone, but zone we want specifically to be geographic, because if you're going to use geographic zones, we are going to ask you at some point to help us develop a map of your zones. And you'll see when we go into the weights and measures planning tools, there's a map that shows you all the locations that you're either have inspections due or that you're planning to do inspections. And we can overlay those zones onto that map. So that instead of being a multiple selector, that's just a single selector since they're geographic and therefore mutually exclusive. Then we've added a legacy ID. So obviously you'll have inspection history and you'll be able to choose whether you want to bring that history into CalCATS or leave it in a legacy system. So you can use the legacy ID to attach or to associate this location with the old system if you want to keep your old data in the old system and be able to link the two together. Then we have the secret sauce for making the map work, which is we need to know latitude and longitude for a location. And let's see what I have here. I do not have a valid address. So let me cheat real quick. What grocery stores do you have here?
John, I have one for you. It's a Vaughn's.
Okay, I just want to copy and paste from here.
Okay, yeah.
So we'll cheat and we'll use this Target grocery for our location. So pretend this is a Safeway. So I'm going to change my physical address. Let's see, I want this to go here. Okay. So we added a little geocoder that, given a real address, will pop open a dialog that tries to geocode that address. Okay, so my geocoder is going to tell me it found the exact address, which I would hope it would. Sometimes it might come back and say it didn't find an exact address. And in that case, you want to be pretty careful about using the latitude, longitude that it returns, because it might be the centroid of a zip code or something like that, which was not very accurate. If I just want to check and make sure this is correct, I can click on this show location on Google Maps, and that'll open up a new browser tab and actually put, a red pin on that latitude, longitude. So you can verify using Google Maps that that's actually the location you want, which, scratch out where it says Target, put in Safeway. So that's the correct location. So I'll say, yes, I want to use those coordinates, and that'll update the coordinates here for you. That's really great for doing this once or twice, or maybe even 10 times or 20 times. But obviously, when we get you going in production, we're going to want to transfer your locations electronically into the system, and that process includes running a batch geocoder for all of your addresses and filling in these coordinates for all of them based on those results, so you don't have to do that manually once your data is loaded. And then the last part of the form is just some other miscellaneous information, all optional. If it is an ag location, you can track some information about it. If it's a grower location, what's the permit number? And the ag type, if it's the pest control business, you can enter their license. Again, just for tracking purposes, it doesn't feed into anything else particularly in the system. If it is a cab company, typically what counties have done is they've created a location per cab number so that you can track the individual cab inspections as locations. And that can be done either by cab number or by cab license plate. And then the last two boxes are kind of important. When we go through the process of automatically generating your device registration invoices, this checkbox will tell us whether we're going to address those to the location or to the headquarters. And for most big companies, they want the invoices sent to the headquarters, but they want the registration certificate to be sent to the location. So I'll check that one to say, you know, once they've paid, let's mail the device registration cert to the location. Okay, so that's phase two. We've got our business, we've got our location. Now we need to say, right, what do we do at this Safeway as weights and measures inspectors? So again, we'll go to the end of the row here and we have a little set of scales. That's our subprograms and device types icon. And that will tell us at the Safeway, we have the following device types. And right now we haven't added any. So let's add some device types that typically we're going to deal with at a Safeway. Let's go first with counter scales. Okay, so we've got, like past them, counter scales, right? Typical deli counter scales, they're going to have a bunch of these.
They're also computing scales, just for the record.
What's that? Oh, sorry, deli
computing scales.
Yep. Yeah, the counter scales will be elsewhere. Okay, so anyway, computing scales. We can further assign districts to the individual device types at a location. So, you know, you can get more specific and say, well, at this Safeway, you know, the counter scale computing scales are going to be in other rural or, you know, PV District 2 or what have you. This isn't necessary. This is a level of detail that, you know, other sort of like LA and Santa Clara might get into. We do want to know how many specific devices they have. So they've got 5 computing scales at this location. If they're vehicle mounted or transportable devices, how many vehicles do they have? Which obviously counter scales is irrelevant. And then for each one of these programs, we're going to want to set up a recurring routine inspection interval, right? So most of your inspection types, other than maybe price verifications and I don't know, however you're set up, we're going to have either an annual or a 10-year or a 2-year or 4-year expected reinspection cycle for the initial inspections. So in order to establish that cycle, we can do it one of 2 ways. We can take the last inspection date and there's an inspection frequency that gets set up for each device type. Or if there's already been a history, if you've already done a routine inspection on this device type, which obviously we're just setting it up so we haven't, but if you had done a routine inspection, it would show the last inspection date and how many devices were inspected on that date. Or we can just enter a next inspection due date, right? So when we come to populate your weights and measures data from your existing database, we're going to be asking for enough inspection history to figure out when was the last time this location was inspected for this device type. So if I put in, this was done 5/31/2020, well, let's make this March 31, 2020, and we got all 5 devices. You know, then I can, if I had a, I don't have a default inspection frequency listed here, but I should. But that's going to mean that the next inspection is going to be 3/31/2021.
Hello,
So,
John.
Yep.
Yeah, this is Jay. So I'm kind of one of the weights and measures inspectors for Imperial County.
Mm-hmm.
So the way that you are explaining this looks like it's pretty general. For example, for us, like the last inspection date, yeah, it's correct. That's good information. But as far as like why, for example, if 5 were inspected and you know, like a store has 6, you know, computing scales. For us, it's really important to know why that one failed. If we issued a red tag, notice of violation, any of that, is that going to be able to be included in this?
Yeah, that's actually going to go into the remarks on an inspection. So what we're doing here is we're just kind of preceding some inspection due dates. When we actually go out and do the routine inspection or a place and service inspection at this location, Then there's places where we can record much more detailed information about, each device and what the failures were and what the violations were and so on.
But is that something that's going to be able to, I guess, be tabulated as far as if I could put it in the comments, that's not going to be able to grab it. And if I want to get a report saying how many devices are pending for, just devices,
Yes.
they're not able to tell me how many
Yep.
devices are pending based on what type of violation.
Yeah, the number of devices inspected during an inspection, that doesn't go in comments. That'll go actually in your detailed inspection results. So let's have a rip through actually doing an inspection, and then we can come back to your question, and hopefully it'll be more apparent where all that information goes.
I have a question on this page. I'm sorry to interrupt. If we chose that we didn't want to do like sometimes like, let's start with LPG this year and we'll do those early in the year and then we'll get to counterscales later in the year. So we don't necessarily do it all based on the calendar, like, we want to do it before next March. Is there a function for that?
There's two ways you can deal with that. So there's the DMS requirement for the routine inspection frequency for devices, right? So if they say you're supposed to inspect these devices every year, that might set this next inspection date based on the default calculation, right? So if I go and do a routine inspection, it's going to calculate out a year and it's going to put in whatever the next due date is. Now, you can look at that due date, put it on your planner, and go out and do that inspection earlier in the year. And we'll actually do that as an example, and you'll see you then have options for whether you want to reset the annual frequency based on the current inspection date, or if you want to keep it based on, when the inspection was actually due. Or if you decide just in general across the board, all right, you've got all of your computing scales and you do them all generally in October, November timeframe, but next year you want to do them all in like June, July timeframe, you can come back to this screen and override the calculated next inspection due at any time. So you can go to your computing scale locations and just reset those inspection dates. And that way, when your inspector looking at their planner, they'll see that inspection date now is shifted from October to June.
Would that be by location though? Because we're in like a location specific submenu, right? And rather than being in like I just want all of my computing scales to be done in June.
Yeah, Zach and I have had a conversation about creating a utility to do it by device type rather than having to do it by location. Right now it would be by location.
And it's worth mentioning that, and correct me if I'm wrong, John, that like most of these dates are going to be informational, be able to still query that information from the system based on like when the last inspection was done. But if you are maintaining those next inspection due dates, then those would potentially be helpful values, going forward.
They are, yeah. And as you do your routine inspections, this information gets updated for each routine inspection you do. So really the initial setup is just to get something pre-populated in there so that you have an idea of when that location should be inspected for that device type. Okay, so we got some computing scales. We're also going to go and add let's see, we want to do some package audits, right? So that's it's not a device type. The terminology is a little bit loosey-goosey, but it is an inspection program, and there's a different kind of inspection form that's used for it. Obviously for package audits, number of devices, vehicles, all of those things are kind of irrelevant, but we want to get this inspection done by the end of the year. And then they might have a gas station too, right? So we want to do petroleum and retail motor fuel devices. So let's add in petroleum. Obviously no devices, and we want to get to that one by March of next year. So, for each location, we can go through and just annotate which inspection types or device types that location has.